It's going live. Are we online already? Did you get the message or Eduardo?
Give me a second. I was switching screens.
Maybe I can check here.
Bear with me. If anybody knows whether we're live, please help me out as well. I'm checking.
I think we are. Yes, we are online. Yes. Okay. So going back to sharing. There we go. Okay. So welcome everyone to this seminar today. I'm Adriana Maldonado Chaparro, and I will be your host today. And I just want to thank everyone for coming in to this talk. First, before we get started, I want to thank David Fisher for his talk on how and when social interactions alter evolution. It was a great discussion afterwards. And just before, because I know some of you might leave at the end of the talk, our next speaker is Christina Beck. She will be talking about social consequences of human food subsidizing birds. So please mark your agendas. And today's speaker, Wolfgang Forstmeier. Wolfgang got his PhD at Würzburg University in the Max Planck Research Center of Ornithology in 2001. So he has a long career here. Currently, he holds a position as a research scientist in the Department of Behavioral Ecology and Evolutionary Genetics with Bart Kempernas and at the Max Planck Institute of Biological Intelligence in Seville in Germany. I want to highlight that Wolfgang was a recipient of the Marie Curie Fellowship and the Emmy Noether Junior Research Group Leader Fellowship as well, two very prestigious fellowships, both in Germany and Europe. And after that, he got funding from the Max Planck for innovative research. So I guess that's where he got all the funding to get started his zebra finch work. So his research focuses on sexual behavior and mate choice in birds, and he used captive populations on zebra finches, although you will probably hear today that he's been shifting a little bit to rough sandpipers. And what he wants to do is to examine to what extent preference are anonymous or individual specific and how this preference developed as based on previous experiences. So Wolfgang has a great publishing record with more than 100 papers published in different journals in our field and in the field of evolution. And I want to highlight as well that he has 3 registered studies. And I really encourage all of us to get started on this practice, which favors transparency in science. And with no further ado, I just want to let Wolfgang start his talk. His seminar title is The Honest Signal Fallacy and the Power of Advertising. Wolfgang, you can share now.
Okay, thank you very much, Adriana. You can probably see my screen now.
Yes.
But unfortunately, let me stop this one more time because I cannot see the presenter mode. That's better. Oh. Excuse me, that is gonna take a while with these two screens. Maybe I can do it.
No worry.
I now can go here and click share and share this one. And now I can bring this back. So, because otherwise I never look into the camera and it looks stupid if I'm always looking like that. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. Okay, the title of my talk I've changed slightly: the honest signal fallacy and the overlooked power of optimal advertising. So if you've been educated as a classical behavioral ecologist like I have, and your opinions about mate choice and courtship and signaling have remained within the boundaries of the conventional wisdom of the last 50 years or so, what I want to achieve in the next 45 to 50 minutes or so, I want to quite radically change your opinion on these topics. And it's going to be quite interesting to see to what extent that works. When we see a situation like this, there's a, let me get the pointer. There's a golden pheasant male that is courting a female that you can see here. It's clear to us that this female wants to get the best possible mate, right? So she will try to choose the best possible mate. But for the advertiser, um, we think ornaments and displays that he uses have evolved in such a way that they will honestly indicate his genetic quality, and this happens because the chooser's preferences have evolved such that it has been selected to ignore ornaments that are uninformative and to focus on signals that are informative. And because of that, these adaptive preferences of the chooser, we think that choosers will gain good gene benefits and sexy sun benefits from being choosy about these quality indicators. Now, when we think of another kind of advertising, and that is commercial advertising in humans, we have a very different perspective. It is quite clear to us that advertisers maximize their success not by being honest, but by selectively triggering only positive emotions, which we call sensory exploitation. It's quite clear that choosers will have difficulties avoiding getting tricked by this and that they will unlikely benefit from trusting the advertisements. And something like 2 years ago, I realized that there is this enormous contrast between these two situations, how we interpret them, that we think this is largely honest and this is largely deceptive. And I started wondering, are there really good reasons to have very different opinions about these two situations, despite there being so many parallels? So this is what I want to address today. What I want to talk about mostly is the mate choice situation with regard to honest signaling of quality. I want to talk less about honest signaling in male-male competition or in signaling to predators or other contexts. And I'm mostly want to talk about genetic quality, like the good gene and sexy sun hypothesis, less about mate choice for direct benefits. The three things that I've highlighted here, good genes, sexy suns, and sensory exploitation, they directly relate to the three concepts of mate choice that we have developed. Here we have the sensory exploitation situation. Here we have the idea of honest signaling, where males advertise their genetic quality and females or choosers would gain good gene benefits from preferring those. And sexy sun benefits would be here in Fisher's runaway and in the good gene process as well. And what we have sort of settled on over the last 50 years is kind of the thinking that evolution will optimize the chooser preferences in that direction so that they obtain more benefits. And so that if all kinds of signals exist, signals that just exploit the sensory system of the chooser and signals that actually promise benefits, then the choosers will evolve towards only paying attention to these. And so it is really the honest signaling idea and the good gene sexual selection that has really shaped our perception about about how mate choice works. And according to that, we have concepts, Rowe and Houle have explained to us why choosers would never run out of benefits that can be gained, genetic benefits that can be gained. We have this very nice model from Henshaw et al. Explaining exactly what I just said, how we get this adaptive evolution towards indicators that promise benefits. And we also have a model that explains why honest signaling can actually be also adaptive for advertisers from an advertiser point of view. And so this has really shaped our expectations, what we should expect to observe when we study mate choice and displays. So our expectation is that displays and ornaments evolve to honestly reflect quality. We expect that all choosers should prefer high quality mates. That means if the quality is directly visible, all choosers should agree, and that should lead to choice being quite unanimous. In mating systems where unanimous choice doesn't work, like in a monogamous mating system, we expect the evolution of mutual mate choice by both sides, such that high quality males will pair to high quality females, leaving the lower quality individuals to each other. And in such systems where the assortment by quality is not perfect, we expect to see differential allocation so that a lower quality partner mated to a higher quality partner will be prepared to maybe work harder, for instance, in parental care, to make up for this in order to retain the higher quality partner. So these have been our expectations. And now let me tell you about my experiences from the last 20 plus years on working on this captive model system. So I've worked on zebra finches in captivity. They're kind of the laboratory mouse or in ornithology because they're so easy to keep and breed, but also very nice to study in captivity because they behave quite naturally there. And the only thing that you really need to know about them is that they're lifetime monogamous birds. So when I started working with them, the first thing that I had to realize is that displays and ornaments do not seem to honestly reflect individual quality. For instance, if we focus on the alleged best indicators of good genes in this species, the courtship rate, how much a male courts a female when you put them together in an experimental trial, if you look at that in relation to male condition here, this is like a early growth condition when the male was a nestling, how he was raised. So when the male was 8 days old, whether he weighed only 2 grams, so was nearly starved to death, or whether he weighed 6 times as much, 12 grams, has almost no effect on how he will behave as an adult. So there's hardly any condition dependence there. There is a significant effect, but there is so much scatter. This is far from being an accurate information about condition that is being conveyed, where you would think that courtship rate would be an accurate information about condition. That's not the case. If a female wanted to use this trait to get good genes and would say like, I only accept a male from the top 50% of this of these males, then in order to get a higher condition mate, she would basically be drawing a lottery ticket. So this has very little information content. Now we can extend this to other traits. For instance, beak color is the most frequently studied visual trait of the zebrafinch, like a visual ornament. And also there we see a very weak correlation coefficient. When you compare this to a trait that is not sexually selected, just like tarsus length, we can see much stronger relationships there, much stronger condition dependence, but these are remarkably resilient to early rearing conditions. Now you may say, okay, this is just early rearing conditions. Some people are interested in that, but what about adult condition? Well, what we can do in captivity is we can use quite massive amounts of inbreeding in zebra finches to produce really low quality individuals. You wouldn't normally see that in the wild, where inbreeding is exceedingly rare. And if you do that, you will see that there is some condition dependence. There are trends in the expected direction. Inbreeding is a bad thing, so the correlations are now negative, but they're again very weakly, only very weakly condition dependent, these traits. And in captivity, we can even calculate really something like a measure of good genes, that is breeding values for fitness from long-term pedigrees that we have. So the ability of these birds to really reproduce and produce a lot of offspring into the next generations. And also there we see trends in the right direction, but extremely weak relationships. So always we have this lottery situation. When I started studying their mate choice, I first had to understand that females will primarily disagree on who they find attractive. If you quantify the repeatability of male attractiveness across different females, it's as low as 5 to 10%. So it's hardly measurable. With a lot of data, you get this significant, but it's almost not there. When you talk about preferences with regard to phenotypes, they won't prefer males with redder beaks. They won't prefer males with higher courtship rate. And if you look at male choice of females, we saw that they are largely unable to identify high fecundity females. So if you give them a choice between females that are from the top 5 to 10% of females that have the highest fecundity and contrasted with really low fecundity females that won't lay any eggs, males have only a 55 to 60% probability of mating with a higher fecundity female. So 40 to 45% of the males will reject the high fecundity female and will go for the low fecundity one. And then when studying the question of mutual mate choice for quality, this is where really like my worldview of how I had thought the system works really started falling apart. We took extreme care to really quantify male and female quality in the best possible way by summarizing all thinkable quality indicators, including inbreeding coefficient, including real fitness measures, into principal components, and then plotting male against female principal component scores, so their quality measures. You see there's absolutely no trend towards assortative mating, high quality males pairing to high quality females. And now you may think that, oh yeah, this is the perfect situation here. We have a super high quality male that's paired to a really low quality female. Surely that female should then do most of the work in order to retain the partner. And when we do this test for differential allocation, we get absolutely nothing, just a trend in the opposite direction. So to summarize this, displays and ornaments do not honestly reflect quality. Choosers do not prefer high quality mates. Monogamous pairing is not assortative for quality, and there's no differential allocation to retain a higher quality partner. Now, some of you may say that, oh yeah, you're studying captive zebra finches. What do you expect? If you go to the wild, everything will work out as planned. Okay, so let's have a look at a bigger picture. So uh, there is this meta-analysis by quite recent by Doherty, who collected a lot of estimates of the condition dependence of traits across many, many species. And I'm reanalyzing this meta-analysis of his. So these are 520 effect size estimates. These are basically correlations between condition factors and the level of sexual signaling that they do, which is mostly measured as courtship rate. So that's what I wrote on the y-axis here. So these are basically correlation coefficients between condition and signaling that can go from +1 to -1, where +1 would be like perfectly honest, and -1 would be deceptive signaling, so that the lowest condition individual sings the most. And after Fisher-Z transformation, they spread out a bit more widely. Instead of from +1 to -1, they go from +2 to -2. So basically here would be the honest signaling cases. These would be deceptive cases where low condition individuals signal the most. And these are the uninformative cases here in the middle. And I plot them here over sample size in such a way that the accurate estimates that come from large sample size are on the left. Here are the studies that are based on very small sample size, just n equals 10 individuals that have been measured for estimating this condition dependence. And here is where n equals 100 sits. And if we fit a regression line through that, you see that there is significant publication bias in especially that we get a tendency for more honest signaling just in those studies where the sample size was really small. If you go to the left end of the regression line, this is exactly where you hit pretty much the x-axis, the situation of uninformative signals. This data set of 520 estimates contains a lot of estimates that I think aren't really ideal for answering our question. So I have a much more stringent subset of estimates here, which are 62 estimates. I want to focus on only natural correlations, not experimental ones, because you can always design an experiment where you say, I turn up the temperature to such an extent that at some point all males are going to stop courting the females. And so I've proven that courtship is condition dependent. That's not the point. What is relevant is basically whether natural variation in courtship rate of males is informative about natural variation in their condition. So I want to have this subset of natural correlations of signaling with either body condition or parasite load, which is inverted to make it a positive thing. So something like parasite freeness. And so now we have, again, a similar regression line that indicates a similar pattern, a tendency towards some publication bias. But at the left end, where the sample sizes are really small, we are hitting 0 again. And now let me move this graph to the left to generate a little bit of space. What you can see here is this typical funnel effect that as the sample sizes go down, we get more and more noise. And that is actually a very predictable phenomenon that we know, like with a smaller n, we get much larger departures from the true value, simply that's sampling noise. And their meta-analysis has a method of taking out this sampling noise. So what I did, I use a meta-analysis. So I remove the red slope, the publication bias, and I remove the expected amount of sampling noise here by focusing on the blobs of the estimates. And then what you see is that actually all the 62 estimates that we have are actually consistent with the idea of that they're uninformative, largely all hovering between plus 25 and minus 25. And in the region where really honest signaling should take place, I cannot see any data there. So who is it then you think who is to blame for this mismatch between theory and data? Is it really the captive zebra finches if the meta-analytical data also shows that the data doesn't really fit to our expectation, or might it be that there's something wrong with honest signaling theory? And that's the point that I want to now follow on. So we have to keep in mind that our decision that evolution will take us to this honest signaling scenario is basically entirely a chooser-centric view. It is the benefits to the choosers that rule the game. So we believe that there is a powerful chooser who decides in which direction this is going. So now, if there is such a powerful chooser, I think we should find out what its superpowers are. And this is the point where I should tell you about my own experiences with advertisements. I'm a person who is very much annoyed by advertisements wherever I go. With a supermarket, I would love to wear headphones so that their jingles don't start eating into my brain. Uh, on TV, the radio, YouTube, wherever you go, uh, I'm annoyed by advertisements massively. So what did I do? So basically, I initially felt like if I exclusively buy from companies where I feel that they're a bit more honest and that they're not trying to exploit my sensory systems, I I can do that, but that doesn't have any effect on that doesn't change the advertisement out there, right? So I started using social media to persuade others to follow my example. But what I often realize is that many consumers are really irrational. They say things like, "Oh, don't you just love that tune or something?" So I really can't relate to their opinions. Well, sometimes I felt I was successful in increasing consumer awareness of a certain trick that advertisers are using. But whenever that happened, the advertisers rapidly came up with new tricks, which meant that I had to start a new awareness campaign from scratch. And then there were these really stressful discussion among consumers what to do about so-called admitted weaknesses. So if one company admits a weakness and says, yeah, we admit our product has this and this problem, what am I supposed to do as a chooser? Am I supposed to now buy this faulty product just to reward the advertiser for being so honest? Or isn't it possible that the other advertiser who says their product doesn't have that same problem, that he's also honest? Whew, this is difficult to decide. And with this, I felt I had to really concede my defeat, right? Advertisement design follows its own powerful rules. My role in advertisement design is actually quite a sad one. It is that my weaknesses will determine their exploitation strategies. So I afraid the powerful chooser that we've been thinking of is really a myth. So let's consider again why my, of course, fictional campaign against more informative advertisements has been a fight against windmills. Well, first, it is interesting to see that, of course, advertisements are designed by advertisers, not by choosers. As an informed chooser, I would say that all advertisements are useless. They don't carry any real information content. A second point is that many choosers will simply fall for tricks. So when I was a child, I loved watching advertisements, and they still live in my brain today. The next point is that when I am an optimal chooser, I will kind of reinforce dishonesty because I don't want to reward somebody who admits a weakness. I want to buy the best possible product, right? And the last point is that I had to understand that advertisers are forced to be incredibly efficient. For them, it's a cutthroat business. There is intense competition between the advertisers who sells and who doesn't. And for me, it's really like a matter of convenience. So selection on me as a chooser is really weak, and it doesn't really influence my well-being, maybe my well-being, but not my fitness a lot. But for the advertisers, it's very strong selection pressure. And with this insight about the advertiser selection pressure being so much stronger, I started realizing that actually we lack a theory of optimal advertising. We have theories of optimal mate choice, but what is a theory of optimal mate choice that's, for instance, based on good gene sexual selection? What is it good for if we do not know what kind of choices the advertisers will offer to the choosers? So here is my version of optimal advertising theory. It has three components: sensory exploitation, minimizing costs, and hiding weaknesses. So sensory exploitation, I think, is quite clear to us that bright colors, strong contrasts, movements with matching sounds, signals that are easy to detect and easy to process, signals that are like symmetry, prototypicality, supernormal stimuli, redundant patterns in space and time, and displays that involve suspense and surprise will be a lot more noticeable for the receiver than something really dull. That's really obvious. So it is clear to us that senses and brains are never really blank slates, that every advertisement can be improved to become even more charming for a pre-existing chooser brain. And advertisements really must please the chooser, otherwise they will not be successful. The second point is the point of minimizing costs. So for an advertiser, we have production costs, and if you can keep production costs low, this is a good thing for the advertiser. So I imagine that solid gold will eventually get replaced with the use of leaf gold, and maybe even with the use of cheap gold spray, as long as if it's only the visual effect that's kind of needed. There is also maintenance costs to be carried, so advertisers will evolve predation avoidance strategies that help reducing that cost. We also have the phenomenon that there will be other traits evolving that help carrying the advertiser tolerate the costs of advertising. This review speaks of so-called compensatory traits that do that. And taking this together, I think we get to the evolution of signals that are really cheap and effective. And what's interesting about such cheap signals is that they are much more widely applicable. So think of a cheap signal that is able to make every male look great. Such a cheap signal will spread in the population more easily than an expensive signal that is only making a few males, maybe only the best males, look great. So I think we should get to the evolution of a situation where all males are really nicely ornamented, and what they are wearing is basically all sort of cheap plastic, if you know what I mean. Of course, it's not plastic. The last point, and that's a very interesting one because that has really been you can hardly find that in the signaling literature. It's the point that you want to hide weaknesses. Now, you may say, Wolfgang, every organism probably has evolved a capacity to really judge like the condition of conspecific. So, for instance, I can see from the skin under your eyes that you're not in good shape at the moment, you had a bad night and so on. So there are such inadvertent cues to condition. Now, the question is, what happens with such inadvertent cues to condition? What will evolution favor? Of course, it will favor the use of something like facial makeup. So when we look again at this golden pheasant and look at it, the female sits on this side, and when you look at that side, the male is actually covering everything of his body except for the eye. He's covering everything with the feathers. And the idea would be, why not use feathers as kind of facial makeup to hide the information about possible weaknesses, like there could be a malformation in the beak, or there could be ticks sitting here on the skin, and the feathers hide all of this. And what you want to do is to make these signals really resilient to deleterious mutations. You want to avoid revealing a large mutational target. So what I'm suggesting is exactly the opposite of Rowe and Houll's genic capture idea, and the opposite of what Hill argues with his index signals. So he argues that carotenoids are such good indicators of genetic quality because they will reveal the proper functioning of a very, very large number of genes that have to do with metabolism and then carotenoid production. But this is not what selection would favor. Selection would favor making you resilient to such deleterious mutations. No male wants to indicate and say, but pay attention, here on this feather I indicate that gene is broken. No, you want to make this as cheap as possible and as uninformative about the mutations that you carry. This is quite similar to what is known as Goodhart's law in economy. It says basically when a measure becomes a target of selection, it ceases to be a good measure. So in other words, we have the pursuit of a goal. For instance, here it would be good genes, which relies on an imperfect proxy, so here my skin, which however is open to corruption, me using facial makeup, then this will eventually lead to proxy failure. And this proxy failure means basically that the proxy, the quality of the skin, is becoming less and less informative. And so this term I'm going to use for that in what's coming. We have to be, of course, clear that there may always be some remaining information content that evolution hasn't managed to hide, right? That advertisers cannot hide. So there may be a rest information content, but it's important to keep in mind that evolution will work towards reducing that. So it's this idea is exactly the opposite of when people say this trait evolved as an honest indicator of male choice, of male quality to facilitate female choice, right? You don't want to facilitate female choice, you just want to hide. So this is really exactly the opposite. So once considering these ideas of optimal advertising, to me, honest signaling no longer makes any sense. And that includes all these much cited conceptual papers that explain to us what all the ornaments are telling females about their qualities. Nothing of this makes any sense to me any longer. Now, if you ask me, Wolfgang, can you put this in a nutshell? What is it that is broken about honest signaling theory? So if I would have to summarize it by one piece, it would be this. So here we have the advertiser, here we have the chooser. And we're talking about the selection pressure that we think is acting on those two parties and the level of adaptation that we think is found in those two parties. So it is clear to us that yes, there is high selection pressure on advertisers because advertisers compete with each other. It's a cutthroat business. But this strong selection pressure is often phrased in a very altruistic way that we say, oh, the ornament evolved as an honest indicator of male quality to facilitate female choice or something like that. So, we don't really take that strong selection pressure serious. And then we expect a low level of adaptation because we say, oh, yeah, there will be some constraints that actually prevent the males from reducing the costs, prevents the evolution of cheating. So there will be no facial makeup. In contrast, when we talk about the chooser, we understand that the selection pressure on the chooser is relatively low compared to the advertiser. And we know that, yes, the genetic benefits of mate choice are small because they're supposed to erode. This is known as the leg paradox. But despite the low selection pressure, we basically assume that adaptation there is perfect already. So the preferences will be optimized and there will be no sensory exploitation possible. So basically, the optimized chooser asks the advertiser to make an informative display, an informative advertisement, and the advertiser complies with this situation. So the weirdest thing here is actually those constraints that we think, why wouldn't the advertisers under the strong selection pressure basically evolve something better? So this is what I call the myth of the advertiser being constrained. So we imagine a situation like all advertisers will simply say what they have to offer, and the chooser can easily find the best deal among them. And some weird constraint would prevent the evolution of something like that, where every male says, oh, didn't you know I'm the greatest? Or the evolution of other advertising strategies that really use sensory exploitation, be it this, or be it this. I mean, I just have to say I love this one because whenever you buy a smartphone now, it's always for free, but it comes with with a small print that you have to read. Now, you can also see that myth as another one that you say, okay, we have all this mess of advertising, but it is the optimal choosers that now magically would come flying in and would fix the situation by ignoring all the sensory exploitation and by very well being able to find the best offer from the best honest signaler that's around. So I think these things that I find highly illogical about honest signaling are all fixed in optimal advertising. Now we have high selection pressure leading to high adaptation and low selection pressure leading to low level of adaptation. So the strong selection pressure on the advertiser to reduce costs and hide weaknesses leads to a high level of adaptation in terms of advertisements being uninformative. So we get proxy failure. So the proxies that the chooser is being presented with, the beautiful feathers, is really uninformative about good gene benefits. And then this explains exactly why the selection on the chooser is going to be really very limited, because if the ornament indicates nothing, preferences for it or against it won't matter. There's not much to be gained. So we have low selection pressure here. We have a low level of adaptation as well. Selection is going to be very weak on these preference functions, and it's going to be delayed because that happens only afterwards. So here the power relationship is really the other way around. The advertiser is the one who designs the advertisement. The chooser has no say in advertisement design. The only thing the chooser can do is, at best, it has an ability to evolve towards ignoring signals that are particularly exploitative. So basically, what an optimized advertiser is offering is a free choice between signals that are uninformative and signals that are uninformative. So these are imaginary numbers, a couple of ornamental traits, and their relationships with, be it some quality measures, be it good genes, right? Now you may say, Wolfgang, wait. Evolution is very patient. If you say this is your data, I can predict that female preferences will evolve towards paying attention to the most informative signal. Okay. So the song seems to contain something that signals at least a little bit of benefit of mate choice. But if you start doing that, you put selection pressure on males, on advertisers to produce this optimal song. And what happens then is that this fitness relationship here will start fluctuating in space and time as new advertiser genotypes keep evolving. If you put selection pressure on it, somebody will fake it, and this relationship will change. And with these constant changes in space and time, what is this going to do? It's just going to water down everything in the long run. So, long term, these relationships will be really, really uninformative. And with this, I think there is near zero selection on chooser preference functions, especially since there's always the time lag that only the fitness consequences to the chooser is then gonna tell about whether the preference alleles go this way or that way. And we have to keep in mind that for any uh, fitness relationship below a certain threshold, I again just put an arbitrary number here, it may well be that the costs of choosiness may be larger than the benefits that can be gained. And if you sum that up, I think if anything, choosers maybe only weaken their sensory biases in the long run. And this is what Holland and Rice so nicely described as chase away sexual selection. For me, the best model about sexual selection that we have, but I realize that it's getting cited less and less frequently, which I find really sad. So to wrap this up, I want to remind you that honest signaling was never an evolutionary theory that considered the interests of both parties. It was always entirely centered on the chooser only and didn't care about the interests of the advertisers. Well, better um, to better overcome such fallacies, it's often good to see them in a historical concept. And so I want to mention that 60 years ago, Lawrence would have explained to us that sexual selection happens for the good of the species. And we all have learned what's wrong with that idea, right? We have our counter arguments. The strongest would be that this situation will be open to invasion. What about a cheater that fights selfishly? Even if this comes at a cost to species survival, it will spread in the population. And if you use the same argument at a meta level, you say, don't you see that the selection at the individual level is so much more efficient than selection at the group level? Now, this situation is very similar. So Zahavi basically said the same thing on a signal evolve not to the benefit of the species, but to the benefit of the chooser. And since he didn't say that literally, I put here what he said. But I also have to say that 5 years ago, Penn and Shamado really completely destroyed Fisher's handicap principle. So now we basically have to go back to other more viable honest signaling models, basically, which is basically what I explained to you at the very beginning, that honest signals are those that will not become ignored by choosers, right? This is the better version now. Now, the counter arguments would be exactly the same as before. Isn't this open to invasion? What about a more efficient signaler that, for instance, uses facial makeup, that breaks up the honesty? It will spread in the population. And again, at a meta level, the same argument. Isn't selection on the advertiser so much more intense than selection on the chooser? So I think these two cases are really quite parallel, and it's interesting to see that. But it's also important to notice that you could say that neither of the ideas is entirely wrong. So here, selection at the species level does happen to some extent. It's just a thing that is not very important. This effect is really negligible, and we will understand a lot more if we focus on the selfishness of individuals. Here it is that selection on the chooser preferences still does happen. The good gene benefits, the sexy sun benefits, they will be there, but their magnitude is going to be tiny and not relevant for what we see in evolution. It's much better to focus on the optimization of advertisers if we want to understand. So in both cases, we have just misidentified the main target where selection is happening. So I want to say that good gene sexual selection is not incorrect. It is just vastly overrated. And if I may ask a question again, a final question, why do females often mate with the most vigorously displaying male? Lawrence would have said, oh, this is because it ensures species survival. 2 years ago, I would have answered, this probably is because they obtain some good genes for their offspring. Or now I'm quite sure it is simply because well-made advertisements are hard to ignore. So if you may want to answer it like this, because I told you that these are not entirely incorrect, it is often a good trick to go back to say, what would we say about this in terms of advertisement? I can ask exactly the same question about commercial advertisement. Why is it that consumers can be influenced by advertisement? Is this because it serves the economy? Is this because they obtain useful information? Or is this because well-made advertisements are hard to ignore? And now I think it's really clear to everyone that this is the only really good answer to this question. So I still have to summarize this in conclusions. I don't know why this taken me a little longer than anticipated. I probably wasn't talking as fast as I thought I would. Okay, if I still may finish this, or is that okay, Adriana? Yeah, cool. Maybe it was also the delay at the beginning. Okay, so in light of these ideas about optimal advertising, I have to say honest signaling theory to me makes no longer sense. And the one reason for this is simply because we have failed to consider the most powerful player in the game, namely the advertiser. Ornaments and courtships may be regarded to work like commercial advertisements that sets us on the right track for interpretation. Advertisers adapt to the sensory biases of their choosers. They are selected to reduce their costs and to hide their weaknesses. Then the strong selection to hide weaknesses will lead to proxy failure, and it is this that has then the knock-on consequences. It's important to keep in mind that I'm not denying that there might be some residual correlation, some condition-dependent remaining, which evolution cannot remove. But it is also important to realize that an inadvertent cue to condition is not the same as an evolved signal. Proxy failure will then mean that the selection on the chooser preferences regarding that failing proxy will be weak. Choosers will not necessarily promote honesty either, because if somebody admits a weakness, they shouldn't reward it because it's not optimal for them either. And given all this, I think that preferences will often be non-adaptive at any given point in time. The information content of the signal will fluctuate much faster than the preferences can change. So this is the evolutionary lag. Therefore, I think choosers may evolve to largely ignore ornaments and displays, as the chase away sexual selection says, and maybe then zebra finches are actually not such an odd species for not having a concept of individual quality. And then very briefly, take-home message, I can make it short. Optimal advertising, I think, reconciles really the theory with the data. Uh, you can avoid misinterpretations if you often think of the analogy with commercial advertising. Ornaments and displays evolve to be efficient, affordable, resilient, and uninformative. And choosers will often prefer the most ornamented advertiser only because well-made advertisements are hard to resist. The only thing that I want to add to this is especially for the young people, is that I encourage you to dare questioning fundamental theory. Um, if you feel that something is not quite right with it, or that the data is not fitting it, sometimes it's really the theory that is misleading us. And this is the one thing where I think we are still far ahead of AI, of ChatGPT, that can only repeat over and over what has been said before. And this is where I think the human thinking is still very much needed. So with this, I'd like to thank especially my co-authors, all the people who have gathered data for the zebrafinch studies, and all the colleagues who have helped discussing these concepts. So I'm finally at the end and ready to take your questions. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Wolfgang, for such a great talk. And the analogy with commercial advertisement is really great, I think, for this topic. So just as a reminder, we're trying to build community. So please state your name, affiliation, and just a brief statement of what do you work on. Wolfgang, if you can unshare your presentation, we can see each other. Yeah. And also, I'm just going to start with questions from people that don't often get to ask questions. So I invite Maria del Mar to ask the first question, and then I'll call Tomislav and then Clara.
Thank you so much. I am actually not a biologist. I am a philosopher. I'm about to graduate from the Pontificia Universidad Javeriana. And okay, so Wolfgang, thank you so much for your talk. It was absolutely interesting, very thought-provoking. And I'm really interested about everything that you just said. I think I have just two questions to make sure that I understood everything correctly. The first one is I'm still not very sure how the selection pressure works in the advertisers. This taking into account that with the analogy or the metaphor about commercial advertisement, when people design advertisements, it's about an external product. But how does the design work if the product that I'm trying to advertise is my own phenotype, which doesn't actually depend on my own volition? And also, if the pressure on the advertiser works because of competition with other advertisers, wouldn't that also give the last word to the chooser in the end? So that's my first question. And the second one is, at the beginning of the talk, you said that according to some results that you had, you realized that actually the courtship rate and also the color of the beak didn't have that much influence on which partners were being chosen. So I wanted to ask you, based on this, why do you think that they still do this type of courtship dances or things that happen for mate choice if they do not have that much of an influence? Those are the two questions, but I think I want to give a priority to the first one about the selection pressure. So thank you.
Wow, they're all very, very tough. I think you will have to help me with this. You shouldn't mute yourself because I'll have to ask back. Uh, Maybe it's easier to start answering the zebrafinch one. Uh, yes, so what I'm saying is that they're not paying attention to the between individual differences in these traits anymore, but like taking these features out completely would probably be detrimental. It's become part of the phenotype of the species. So if you sing to the female, it's clear that you're a male. If you have the red beak, it's clear. And I think these traits they are not very costly to begin with, are probably easily maintained, and but it is not that the female psychology has evolved in such a way as being really judgmental about quality and saying like, ah, I think he's not in such good shape. I can see his beak isn't quite as red, or why is he singing so little? Is he in bad shape? So this is apparently not how they're thinking. Uh, Now, are you not being a biologist, you challenging me on the comparison between the commercial advertising and animal advertising in a place where I didn't expect it. So that's something that I've not heard before. I mean, it's clear to me that the two things aren't entirely comparable. They're not the same thing. I mean, in mate choice, it is, of course, that in the end, it's the chooser and the advertiser that get together and they produce the next generation. With consumers and advertisers, it's something very different, luckily. Um, so for us, I think this using this as a metaphor helps very well because it sets our thoughts in the right direction. From the beginning, we think advertisements are largely tricking us. And I mean, Mike Ryan has tried to explain this to us for 35 years now. And I don't know. I mean, he has gotten huge credit for it, but apparently by far not enough. The honest signaling thinking is still so prevalent because we've always said, yeah, but what about aren't choosers evolving optimal preferences? But I should really try to answer your question more directly. So I can see that, of course, you, in advertising, there's a lot more flexibility, right? The commercial advertisers, they can design an advertisement that is really like very independent of their phenotypic body. In that way, for them, cheating is so much easier. In evolution, this takes more time. Of course, you have to think that all the advertising males that are out there have already been selected because there are the offspring of offspring of offspring of offspring who always have been successful in this game. So their bodies are kind of good enough, their ornaments are kind of good enough, and of course they have to advertise that. But if they're doing not a good job, these alleles will be selected out of the population. So I think they should be quite optimized for doing a good job, and then for the choosing now again female zebra finch, there's just not much information that she could get out of this being picky about some ornaments. So maybe I've not really answered your very difficult initial question, but you see that there are limits to you as a commercial advertiser. You can't maybe learn anything from us. I feel I have learned something from thinking about commercial advertising.
Thank you so much. I think your talk was truly interesting, and I truly encourage this type of thing of like questioning the paradigms, and your theory is very, very thought-provoking and interesting. And thank you very much for your answers. I do think that it does set us in the right direction to try to think about it like this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Tomislav? Tomislav, are you around?
It indicates that it's unmuted, but we can't hear you.
Maybe while he organizes a microphone, we can ask Clara, and then we come back to you.
Okay, thank you, Adriana. Thank you for the talk. Very quickly, there's a lot going on here as I understand what you're saying. I'm Clara B. Jones, social evolution, retired. There's a lot going on here. And you did mention AI. I was going to ask you whether or not you were using an LLM. And maybe just a suggestion, you could use an LLM to unpack particularly the three-part theory that you have. I've had an almost 40-year career, and I've come across quite a few contrarians. And I think I've come across two or three who've managed to influence the consensus in the field, in their fields. I'm talking about animal behavior broadly. How do you intend to influence sexual selection theory? And finally, I'll ask my two questions together. Aren't you saying that I understand the chase away model, of course, and I think it is very compelling. But aren't you saying that females are pretty stupid by not evolving powers of discrimination?
Yeah. So I think it is always better to talk about choosers and advertisers rather than females and males. And I think I've probably made that mistake very often during the talk because that's, of course, my zebra finch perspective that comes in. I mean, so just want to say it's a bit dangerous to say that it's the females that are not smart enough in this game and the males are winning. I think we should talk about it like that, that the chooser is having just a lot of difficulties, a lot more constraints than the advertiser has. At least I can see that in commercial advertising. I can see that in animal courtship. The chase away model, I think to me, has been a very important component to like a building block to kind of form my opinions around. And of course, your Mike Ryan sensory exploitation thinking, the stuff that I feel I can add on top of it is a real active advertiser perspective. So what I have not been able to really see in the literature, the idea of hiding weaknesses, like facial makeup adaptations, the idea of cost reduction is hardly visible in the literature, which is quite surprising. It's probably because it's been so counterintuitive to anybody who is into honest signaling that people have rejected that right away. And I think what I've also been missing is the notion that the selection on the advertiser is so much stronger than the selection on the chooser. I've also been trying to find literature on that. You had a question regarding large language model. I'm not any expert on that. Emmy, my co-author, who's also here, helped me use ChatGPT to kind of uh, probe the literature on these topics to find out more. I My feeling was that artificial intelligence is not very good at doing these things yet. I mean, it helps you maybe locating references that you would have overlooked because it can read so quickly, but it's really not good in conceptualizing and finding really what you are looking for. But it helps you searching for sure. I mean, it can read so much faster than we can, but the summarizing, I think, is better if we do that ourselves. I don't know whether that was your intention or whether that was what you were aiming at.
Well, that's okay. Thanks for responding and good luck to you. Thank you for answering.
Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Clara. We'll come back to Tomislav. Seems like the mic is still not working. Okay, so I'll move forward and then I'll come back to you. Yes, will that be okay? So next question comes from Juan.
Yeah, hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's see, I'm the project manager for Emily's Evolve project with the mannequins, based in Florida State University. I have a question that I like the analogy with the advertisements, and this reminds me of the paradox of choice, where you have multiple options that you can choose, and this in economy leads to a problem, well, where people are under undecision, but also with lower satisfaction. So, like under you like proposed model, how do you think these individuals can deal with that paradox of choice if everyone has cheap traits, but also every male looks nice, as you say?
So yeah, maybe you can explain that problem a bit further so that you're unhappy with too much choice. That's a
Yeah.
phenomenon that we observe in humans. Do you know whether that has also been, whether there's any evidence that such dissatisfaction also exists in animals if they have too much choice? I think, is that what you're referring to, or what
I
you're
think
hinting
it's,
at?
yeah, I mean, if this phenomena happens in humans, that you have, if you go to a market and you have different brands of milk, so to say, all cost the same, but they have slightly differences. So is this better if you only have one brand of milk? So in a system where animals have multiple options and they all have these cheap traits, but every milk looks the same, how do you think they deal? Like in humans, you can say like, maybe some person said what matter the most, others have social inputs, others just limit the number. What do you think that happens in like different species?
So there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. The first one is that, as long as this unhappiness about the choice doesn't lead to really consequences for evolution, right? If it doesn't reduce the chooser's fitness because it is so frustrated, uh, then I would say for evolution, it doesn't matter as long as it picks something, right? My personal feeling was just that, as maybe it's the human mind that is also very special and not so easily applicable to animal minds, because the human mind, I think, is just extremely complicated. And so as humans, we've been obsessed with the idea that made choice. Yeah, of course. I mean, why would you choose if you're not trying to get a better deal, all right? And when I saw that my zebra finches don't have such a concept of like ranking in quality and saying like, ah, yeah, this is what I'm striving for, and like being really judgmental about quality, that they approach partners, conspecifics, I mean, before choosing one, really in a different way. So to them, every conspecific is sort of equally okay, equally good candidate. So when they meet males for the first time, they're not choosy about them. And then uh, they start slowly developing sympathy, antipathy, likes and dislikes, but it emerges from the interactions that they have. And so they have behavioral compatibility, incompatibility, which then sort of will decide with whom they end up and who they really love and who they really hate later. But when they met them the first time, there was no indication of that's going to happen. So it means that I can see that what they later show as strong preferences for certain individuals and dislikes for others, that wasn't there at the beginning. So I can be quite sure it's not part of their phenotype. It's something that only happened in their interactions. So this is how their mate choice happens. So that's sort of my empirical experience about this one organism that I was able to study for such a long time. So I feel I kind of understand what's going on in their heads. So they're not judgmental about quality, and they're not. I wouldn't imagine that they have such huge problems with that. What other organisms are doing, I'm struggling with, right? I mean, studying mate choice is so much more complicated than studying, let's say, ornaments. There we can gather a lot of data, but there's just a few species on this planet, I think, of which we understand mate choice to a reasonable detail. I mean, humans, of course, best, and animals is a lot harder. So I really do not know. I think we've been just always starting from our human perspective that shouldn't they be picky about, and then shouldn't that give them such, as you say, for instance, also this discomfort of having too many choices. So I don't know whether that exists. It's all an interesting question, very, very difficult. I probably have hardly answered your question, but at least that's what came to my mind.
Mhm.
It's a super interesting topic. Yeah,
Yeah, I think this can shed light on like which other measurements we can take into account. Like if they're also, I don't know, looking at other females in this case are choosing. This is the social input other females need. Like Emily Duvall published a paper with the inferred attractiveness. So other females are looking at other females, but they're choosing. So yeah.
yeah. So mate choice copying, I understand, would make a lot of sense to just make it easier. I think my kind of thinking uh, is 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 very much in line with mate choice copying being often an outcome when there's so much uncertainty, when there's so little information content in the displays. I would also argue that you should probably get more useful information from elsewhere, maybe outside the display context. That would be a situation where it's easier to gather information. And also, as consumers, we're doing that, right? We're not informing us from the advertisements that we see. We try to get other sources of information that is more reliable.
All right. Okay. Thank you for answering. This was a very insightful talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your question.
Thank you, Juan. I'm going to ask a question from YouTube. So the question is from Clara Masote. Great talk. Thank you. I have a question. How do you suggest we improve mate choice studies in light of advertising theory? And she's a biologist, mainly interested in mate choice and sexual selection, and affiliated to the University of Minas Gerais in Brazil.
Can you repeat the question itself again? Because
The question itself, how do you suggest we improve made choice studies in light of the advertising theory?
Oh gosh. No, yeah. I'm getting really tough questions. I also didn't see that coming. So yeah, I haven't really thought about this. So I think it's first important to be open-minded about the consequences of what I've just tried to explain, that the system won't work as we anticipate. And I feel that only by like looking, I mean, really giving the species the chance, giving the data the chance to prove us wrong, is kind of the open-mindedness that we need to have, and that we need to be prepared for. But if one goes one step further and says, okay, I expect all this courtship advertisement to be quite uninformative, and there be little consensus among choosers in who they prefer, and there's going to be little information content, little ability to pick the higher quality individual. That's kind of what I would suggest the mindset should be when I now approach a system. But of course, it's also fine to I mean, there may be other systems that are something that I've not that doesn't correspond to my experiences. Yeah, definitely, it's important to remain open so that the data has a chance to prove you wrong in your ideas that you started with. That is the experience that I had for really all the 25 years working with zebra finches, that basically I think almost every one of my experiments failed. I mean, really brutally. I have only maybe 1, 2, 3 positive findings that really made sense to me as a behavioral ecologist. Uh, I always said, like, these birds have never read Krebs and Davies' Introduction to Behavioral Ecology. They really don't comply with what we expect them to do. And I think as long as we're on the wrong track, we keep asking the wrong questions, and then the birds give us answers or like animals give us answers that don't make much sense to us. But hopefully, eventually, we can really use that data in a more open-minded way, right? And then sometimes we'll need to revise theory, I feel.
Okay, we hope that answers Clara's questions. So keep an eye on it, Clara. I'm going to ask Tomislav questions because he wasn't able to fix his mic. So the question is, I wondered whether you can differ between the function of a trait and, oh, wait a sec. Differ the function of a trait and the intention of the advertising. Can you differ between animals and humans? Maybe I just copy pasted.
Differ means differentiate. Whether you can differ between means differentiate, to separate between the function of a. I don't know, it's gone.
The function of a trait. Oh, it might be and the intention of the advertising. Yeah, it's just a typo there. So if we can differ between the function of a trait and the intention of the advertising. Yes. Function and intention.
Not that I that would, I think, really need to be discussed with feedback, because to me they would be aligned, right? I think to me I can only see, maybe my thinking is too simple now. I only see the advertiser as an agent who knows what he wants to get matings in animal advertising, in courtship, and is basically selected to optimally be able to achieve that through the advertising. So the advertising has the function to enable that. So I don't see the difference.
He says that Alan Graffen wrote about it in behavioral ecology in the 1990s. Thomas,
Okay.
you type in the everyone chat so everyone can see your, yeah, okay, sorry.
Okay. I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that, and I should just look this up. I don't know where to find this, the messages.
It's on the bottom, it says chat, and then you just
Yeah,
click
yeah,
on
I
it.
have the chat, but where is it now? Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh. Ah. Okay. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. What I can read Alan Graffen's 1990 paper again. Others I would have to check. The function of the trait. I mean, from the honest signaling perspective, the function of the trait was always to be an honest indicator for the benefit of the chooser, and the intention of the advertiser being something completely different, right? Wanting to get mating. So there, I see this quite dissociated. For me, it is kind of, the trait has evolved in such a way that it really serves the advertiser, not anybody else. And I think that is the misconception. I'm not sure whether, yeah, okay, but I don't know really what Graffen wrote in all of his papers. Yeah, I would have to really read up whether I can still learn something from that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I'll invite Tommy's Lab to just, get in touch with Wolfgang and
Yes,
maybe
yes,
we
that's a
can
good
have a
idea.
discussion over email or something. Awesome. So we have a question from Eduardo and then from Suleima. Thank you, Tommy's Lab, for your question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for a very interesting talk, very much needed. Yeah, I asked the same. I don't know why Michael's ideas have not had more effect. We need more of this. I celebrated the student coming from philosophy. Wonderful, wonderful discussion. I want to go back to how you studied, pointing us at actual very careful and thoughtful review of the data by examining the meta-analysis and redoing it, and we need to republish, we need to reanalyze, we need to read everything that's out there. A specific question is, as you were going through these studies, was the effect size the correlation coefficient? I mean, the metric that the literature has been evaluated is a correlation coefficient among the traits that are being examined?
No, the correlation coefficient between the signaling, the amount of signaling, this was kind of courtship rate or something like that, and the condition indicator, the condition trait, which
Right.
could be parasite load, for instance,
Okay.
right? Whether
So
individuals with,
that's what I
and
thought. So,
the-
but then I would add another layer of complexity to the careful thinking you are inviting us to do that we don't even know. I mean, if we're going to make an argument about evolution, for most of those analyses, we don't even have the data or try to understand the extent to which those metrics are getting at a heritable trait. We don't know heritability, we don't know the genetic basis. So on top of everything you are describing, which I fully agree, think given more complicated when we do, for most species, maybe with the zebra finches, you guys are in a fantastic place. But for most species, we have absolutely no information on the genetics of the behavioral traits on which we make the evolutionary argument.
Mm. So, I mean, the disadvantage is really that, I mean, also this kind of discussion and thinking about this more deeply now would kind of encourage us to really look at the good data sets that we have and to reanalyze them now in a most informative ways. I mean, we have enough animal populations in the wild that have been studied for decades with detailed pedigrees where we can do heritability analysis. We can calculate variables that are really the most meaningful, like the breeding values for fitness, which are sort of getting closest to good genes, right? I mean, this is what, or there is also a nice black grouse study that just came out recently where they did genomic predictions of mutations that they carry. So they really quantify genetic quality by like having sort of candidate deleterious mutations counted up. And that is really a predictor of their mating success. So it works to have genomic predictions of genetic quality. And so I think these approaches, maybe such genomic approaches, maybe pedigree-based approaches that give us the best possible, get us the closest possible to the good genes that we were talking about. And then you can test again whether the ornament is indeed a lousy indicator of good genes. And yes, I think it's a good exercise to still do it, but I think it's the outcome will most often be what I was already suggesting here, usually with not such good quality data. So of course, those 520 estimates that went into the meta-analysis, when you look at really what this is, and this is maybe what you were also suggesting, very often we have very lousy proxies here saying, this is condition. But then if it's just sort of a mathematical construct of mass over size or something, is it really condition? And, this is
I,
very
I,
difficult.
I fully agree. I liked what you said. I think I'm fully behind you. The idea that more is not better, period, unless you show me it's better. Now, eh, what you're, I'm all for what you're doing. The challenge we face is that one gets the impression, and maybe you can develop for the next fine talk another analogy with humans. One gets the impression that you're much more likely to publish in journals that have high impact if you just get some data many, many times of pathetic quality. But as long as you have hundreds or thousands of species or studies, then you get your paper out. If we encourage our younger colleagues to do what you're encouraging them to do, and I'm with you, and they select out of all those studies those that really match some criteria, then why as humans we're not finding the value in that kind of research to give those studies the space they need if we're going to change this?
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, I mean, Okay, there wasn't really a question there, was there?
No, because I suspect that
Okay.
we're agreeing on the answer. So, but thank you for
Totally.
bringing it
Yeah.
up. Thank you for
And
sharing. It's
and it
good to
just
hear
came
from others.
back to my mind that you said you're also wondering why Mike Ryan's insights haven't been more influential. And I've also been wondering myself about this. Uh, and maybe the answer was one possible answer is that he was never as rude as I am, saying like honest signaling doesn't make sense. Maybe Mike correct me. You never wanted to really pick a fight with the others. Yeah, you said, I'm just offering this to you. This is how I see it. This makes a lot of sense. And then to me, behavioral ecology, the field settled and saying, oh, we can have both. We can have sensory exploitation here, and we have good gene sexual selection and honest signaling there. And it's two possibilities, and they live side by side. And so, but to me, I feel like only really one of them makes sense when you think it through. Ah, yeah, now, Mike, you need to tell me whether I'm right or wrong in this.
Well, yeah, I certainly don't know if you're right or wrong. Um, but for example, I reviewed Zahavi's book on the handicap principle, and uh, and I loved Amat. We were very close friends, but I titled my review "A Principle with a Handicap." And the handicap or the handicap principle was lack of data. And in Amatz's book, it was this more storytelling. For instance, men evolved beards to show what good fighters we are because it puts us at a disadvantage. Well, that's certainly not a mathematical model, it's a verbal model. But, I always tell my students, there's a difference between a model being logical, an argument being logical, and being biological. And we never know if it's biological until we test it with some data. And so I think there's a possibility for interactions. I mean, with runaway sexual selection, Fisher pointed out that you need something to get it started. There's nothing inherent about the basic coevolution model that's going to lead to the elaboration of traits. So Fisher pointed out you need something to get it started, and Landy incorporates into his model of runaway a psychometric model, or whatever he calls it, which is very much along the lines of some aspects of sensory exploitation. But I do think that people just take as the default quite often a good genes model or even a runaway model, as Prom suggests, that this should be our null hypothesis. And because it's an appealing narrative. So and I don't think you're actually being rude. I think you're being rigorous.
And plus, I mean, none of these things. It's fascinating. I feel like when I listen to my colleagues in Europe, there is also some different ways in which we function culturally. You're not criticizing me or him or her. You're challenging ideas and words in writing. That even if we go to the business of publishing, that we don't even know anymore. So we're criticizing something that a journal owns. We have to dissociate what is written from the person. Since we have, I mean, it's fantastic to have these experts joining us today. Can you guys help me comment? Can you comment? I remember talking to Rick Pram as he was developing the book, The Evolution of Beauty. It must have been, I mean, he was working on that when I came to Yale. So he was telling me how he was hoping that he would get some traction on these ideas, not through the academic outlets, not through your typical peer-reviewed paper, but with a book. So I'd be curious to hear from you. How do you connect all of what we've been hearing with Rick's ideas as presented, which again, he also tried to kind of shake a little bit the table about historical views of sexual selection.
Yes. So he visited us in Seviesen maybe 10 years ago, and I have to say I really very much liked his rejection of the honest signaling thought, saying that of course if you think that that is what's going on, you need to prove it first. So my null hypothesis is something else. So he's of course very skeptical about that, just like I am. But I think in the last 10 years since he visited us, or how long is that ago? Let's say, anyway, I've been mostly thinking about this only really in the last 2 years. I've discovered sort of new dimensions to this, new approaches to this starting with this analogy with commercial advertising, and then seeing a lot more things that you just can't find in the signaling literature, or maybe I've still not found it. 2 years is not such a long time, actually, to keep searching for something like this hiding of weaknesses issue or so, which is kind of quite obvious. And facial makeup, when you think about facial makeup, it's so interesting that people say that the ornament evolves to honestly reveal. No, 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 you want to cover, right? All the stuff that's not perfect. And so I think this view, this advertiser-centric view, comes on top of it. And it's interesting that Dawkins and
Guilford.
Guilford, I think, yeah. 78 and 84, they were largely on my side back then. So that was the last time people were really thinking very much along my lines, I felt. And then that was all abandoned as soon as with 1990 Grafen's paper, the handicap principle really took off, and then everything was honest signaling, and sort of that critical ideas about honesty was really forgotten. Richard Prum then brought back the critical attitude, but not from such a co-evolutionary point of view that you say we have two players here, and here in this case, the play. So it's really not like the cuckoo and its host, right? Because the arms race between cuckoo and host is really quite brutal on both of them. There's quite some selection pressure. But here, I can't really see much selection pressure happening on choosers. I think all advertisers that are out there as mates, they're all the offspring of an uninterrupted pedigree of successful reproduction. So why should there be so many bad genes there that you can select out? That doesn't work for me. And I think this eugenic approach to sexual selection that is a really historical heritage that we have. I mean, that has definitely been on Lawrence's mind, and the whole good gene thinking. I don't know why it was so dominating, but I mean, here we really have a co-evolutionary game between advertiser and chooser that is very asymmetric, where the advertiser has so much more power when you think about it, and the advertiser really should rule the game.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
And Eduardo, so now Suleima.
Yes, hi. Thanks. Suleima Tang Martinez. I'm retired from the University of Missouri, St. Louis, and my main interest for much of my life was social behavior and communication. And then about 20 years ago, I started questioning what I came to call the Darwin-Bateman-Trivers paradigm, and have written quite a bit on that now. And I in a sense, I think Eduardo took my question, because my question was going to be about Richard Prum. But I'm not sure that the answer was exactly addressed my question. So specifically, my question is how you see and understand Prum's ideas with regards to beauty, in terms of, the differentiation, if there is any, between his ideas and your ideas. And it seems that you have added the advertiser metaphor, but it would seem to me that the two are very, very closely linked. I also wanted to make two comments. One is, like everybody else, I think that Michael's ideas have not received as much emphasis. Hi, Mike. Great to see you. Looking great. But then the other thing is that I want to reemphasize your advice to students to always question dogma, to always question paradigms, and to always look to see how the existing data, whether in your case it's the species you were working with, or more generally, how it fits with the existing paradigm, and to call it out if it doesn't. And like you said, it's not the data, the empirical data, that is wrong. It's if they don't fit, it's going to be much more likely to be that the paradigm or the dogma is incorrect. And I think as scientists, even though it can be extremely a difficult thing to do, and you can get lots of flack for it, I think that it is imperative for us as scientists to be doing that. And so thank you for emphasizing that. I really enjoyed your seminar. So if you could, which doesn't mean I agree with everything, but it certainly has given me a lot to think about. I've also enjoyed Alec Koselnik's comments in the chat. He hasn't said anything, but the chat has been fun to follow his thinking on this. It also gives me a lot to think about. So anyway, I guess, in terms of the question part, is to go in greater depth as to how you see your ideas fitting in with Prum's ideas, or not fitting in.
So one point about Prum's approach that we have, like, let's say, 4 models of sexual selection. It's the Fisher's runaway, which is basically the starting point of, it's a very simplistic model. It actually doesn't even have any constraints built into it. I've read a more recent review of it, that a model that basically says, well, the way Fisher built it, the peacock's tail would grow to the size of the universe. It has no constraints, which is kind of funny. But if we have that as the most primitive starting point, I have difficulties with Prum saying, oh, we need to go back. Darwin was all right, and Fisher should be our starting point, which is 100 years old. Where I say Mike Ryan was so much ahead of the thinking of the time, seeing that there are these sensory stimuli that just get us engaged, and it's the same if you ask why do humans still fall for advertisements, even though we are so intelligent, we still fall for these tricks despite all our intelligence. This is really such an important component. And with then chase away sexual selection, putting on top of this aspect of harassment, and of, like, really if it is in such a mating system where lots of male harassment and females really avoiding the harassment, we kind of get this as so the move is towards a view that is much closer to the biological reality than that peacock's tail that grows to the size of the universe, which is just a play with numbers. And so I really don't want to give the credit to Fisher. I want to give it to Mike Ryan and the chaseaway sexual selection model of Rice and Holland. What is sort of, I mean, where I think I have made a little progress beyond Richard Prum. So I think there's a lot of agreement, I think, probably between my perspective, Mike Ryan's perspective, and Prum's perspective, saying that, yeah, the brain and the sensory system of the chooser are kind of what this is all about. This is what needs to be triggered. And the stuff that maybe I add to this is a stronger perspective on the advertiser, how he's getting optimized. So if something like an optimal advertising theory would become sort of something where you say this is something that we need to have in mind, that the optimization of that will always be happening, and the selection pressure on that being so much stronger than the selection pressure on the chooser preferences, which are pre-existing in the first place, all these sensory biases, then I think we're approaching a lot more realistical scenario where we say now we can start making sense of the patterns that we see. So that's maybe my answer to that. But I never know whether I can live up to your expectations with your questions. I find all questions today very challenging. Maybe, yeah. It's not easy for my brain to solve all this.
Because it also seems to me that your idea of makeup to cover up imperfections or weaknesses, in a sense, you could flip it and say they're using this makeup to make themselves look more beautiful,
Yes.
from perspective. So
yeah, so that's what I was suggesting for the feathers, right? To see
exactly.
the feathers as some cheap material that is actually not that expensive to produce, and that is nice, that exploits the sensory system really well, and that helps you cover up everything, right? So that is the thought. Alex?
Yeah, can I say a couple of things? First, for the positives, and then I'll go for the negative. The positive is, like everybody else, I absolutely agree, first, with your respect for your own data, to actually not dismiss them, but use your data to think. And second, to be iconoclastic and to question all the established theories and stick your neck out to speak against the established revealed truths. I mean, that's wonderful, and I like the way you did it and all that. The next point is, let me make a third point about theory, and this is that it has been said very, in my view, very appropriately, that while theories can be true or false, models can have a third possibility, which is to be true but irrelevant. And in a sense, the point that you are making about all the mathematical theories of the versions of particularly Alan Grafen's 1990s and follow up, is that maybe they are mathematically correct, but they don't explain the facts. So all of that is positive. The next one is that I am very unconvinced by your theory, but your alternative account. I think you sometimes misrepresented the handicap as elaborated mathematically by saying that people suggested that the signaling evolved for honesty. That nobody has said that that I know of in the old guard of behavioral ecology. The idea is to apply the notion that you have an evolutionary game where you have a communication system. The communication system is only maintained if both parties are selected to, the signaler to signal and the receiver to respond. If one of those two parts is missing, then you can prove mathematically that that won't go anywhere. It could still be that reality shows us that it goes. That's another story. We have to account for what is wrong in the theory. But I feel that your theoretical solution relies on dismissing the receiver's selection.
Mm-hmm.
And I see absolutely no justification for that. So I should say.
So I vividly defend that point because I think that has been so overestimated. If you think of a female carrying alleles for a given preference function, so that, let's say, she is more strongly or a little bit less strongly attracted to the red beak of the male, so she cares a little more or a little less. How strong is selection that's acting on that female preference allele? So over millions of females that carry the one allele and the other allele for a bit stronger, for a bit weaker preference, if we sum up the total fitness of these two pools of females, count all their children, they're going to be pretty much exactly the same, because the big color of the male just means nothing. It's a cheap trade. It's not very informative. It's not very condition dependent.
Sorry.
So then there's not much allele frequency change happening in females when the signal is not informative. And so therefore, I think there's not much happening in this end.
I think the debate that we are having would be solved by a proper mathematical formulation. So verbally, we can't do hand waving all the time, and it's ambiguous what we are saying, and it does not. So you need a mathematical formulation. But I would say that, just to put it verbally, what my objection is that in your account, selection preference of the females is sufficiently strong to drive signal evolution. But on the other hand, selection of the females is not strong at all to actually benefit them detecting when they get cheated. And so what I'm saying is that you seem to be having ad hoc modification of the strengths of selection just to fit the outcome. So we won't be able to solve it, but
I'd be happy to explain a little more why I think in this way. I mean, the fantastic model by Henshaw et al. 2022, which I said would be the new version of Zahavi's handicap. I mean, to be honest, the best model of honest signaling that we have, that basically shows that yes, we get some evolution towards adaptive preferences. In such models, females can usually, so I hope I'm not mixing up two models now in my head, but many of these models work like that females can almost directly pick their own fitness by picking the right phenotype of male. Because their very strong relationships are suggested between the ornament and the fitness gets directly inherited to the next generation. And a female that has such a preference allele can just look at the male and say, yeah, I take that one with the high fitness, and then that's what she gets. And of course, if I allow such strong selection to happen on females in a model, I get the evolution of adaptive female preferences. But if I now take our meta-analysis serious and say, okay, the correlation coefficient between the signal and what is really there in terms of good genes is, say, the correlation coefficient is 0.05, or let's make it easier such that the square of it is 1%. I mean, if 99% of the female assessment is measurement error and 1% of benefit, I mean, okay, we need to put this in a proper model, but you see where I'm going. The selection on the females is going to be so weak that this can hardly be optimized. And that, again, this relationship will be fluctuating in time and space as new advertiser genotypes keep evolving, because they will keep evolving much faster than any change in the female preference functions. So I think my point is I see your game theoretical approach where I say I have two players, and this makes a lot of sense in many situations where for both players the costs and benefits are kind of equally large, where for both it's quite important. But if for one of them the outcome is really irrelevant, and I think so, this is where I stand, where I say I want to bring more biological realism into this scenario, where I say when we're talking about mate choice, when the good gene benefits to be gained are so minimal, this is not what drives the system. What drives the system is the rewards to the advertisers that are doing better. So that's about quantitative numbers, my argument, and so therefore we probably can't find common ground. Yeah.
I'm afraid we would find common ground if we could discuss it perhaps with an equation or a logical setting. But now I'm very sorry, but I need to go now.
Oh, but thank you anyway, because the critical
And-
comments are especially appreciated. This is what I'm looking for. So I'm definitely gonna read everything you've written in the comments. I had no chance to look at it, but thank you so much.
Bye.
Well, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Suleima. So it's already 1:03, and so I'm just gonna close the YouTube. Thank you, Wolfgang, for a great talk, very interesting discussion. And for those on YouTube, thank you for staying up until now. We still have 6 viewers on YouTube. So, and I expect to see you all next week for our next seminar.
Bye-bye.
You can stay here if you want to chat more.